Okay. Sunny, Aditya, and Ifiza Sheikh. Hi, sir. I once again welcome you all to this my lecture. The topic today, what we are going to discuss today is the nature and function of criticism. This is the first lecture of the criticism paper, paper number 7. So let us begin with this. So at the very outset, as I told you earlier, it, in your this semester in the TY 5th and 6th semester, you are going to study certain papers, but as far as criticism and linguistics and structure paper is concerned, these papers are new to you. Fine. म्हणजे criticism आणि linguistics हे जे दोन पेपर आहेत तुमच्यासाठी थोडेसे नवीन आहेत. When we talk of criticism, and criticism is supposed to be the foundation or say the base of higher studies. Whoever wishes to pursue higher studies in English language and literature, you need to understand, you need to study criticism, right? So this TY syllabus of yours can be considered to be the foundation of your further studies also. Since this criticism topic is new to you, it becomes very essential for you to understand the essential elements or the introduction or the basic things of criticism. So let us begin with this. So my first slide talks about the word criticism itself. What the term criticism means. So etymologically, this word is derived from the Greek word kritikos. म्हणजे क्रिटिकॉस या ग्रीक शब्दापासून या क्रिटिसिझम या शब्दाचा उगम झालेला आहे. मुळात ग्रीक शब्दामध्ये क्रिटिकॉसचा अर्थ होतो जजमेंट. फाइन. And a critic is a judge of literature. So criticism is something to, it has something to say to the word judgment. Judgment म्हणजेच काय? न्यायनिवाडा करणे. To judge does mean that literature मध्ये judgment करणं म्हणजेच काय? Suppose if I have read a certain book, एखादं नॉव्हल वाचले असेल किंवा एखादं नाटक बघितलं असेल or whatever, whether that work of art is readable or is it good or bad, ह्या ज्या काही गोष्टी आहे ह्याचा जो आपण न्यायनिवाडा करतो ह्या गोष्टीला आपण म्हणतो क्रिटिसिझम. समजतंय? So this word criticism has something to do with the word judgment. आपण असं सुद्धा म्हणू शकतो की क्रिटिसिझम आणि जजमेंट हे फार जवळचे, all these are some related terminologies. Okay, next point असा येतो की literary criticism is the exercise of judgment on the works of literature. Criticos चा अर्थ होतो judgment. Critic is a judge of literature. Criticism हे जेव्हा आपण अप्लाय करतो, when we apply it to the literature, it becomes a literary criticism. So then literary criticism is nothing but it becomes the exercise of judgment on the works of literature. So what are the works of literature then? Works of literature does mean that different genres of literature, doesn't matter whatever genre you are reading, it may be a novel, it may be a poetry, it may be a short story, it may be a drama, a play, whatever, all come under the works of literature. And whether the work of literature, whether the work of art is good or bad is the domain of literary criticism. Got it? म्हणजेच criticism has something to do with judgment. We can say that kritikos is a Greek word. Again, in Greek it does mean judgment, and where we apply that criticism to literature, it becomes literary criticism. Then literary criticism becomes the exercise of judgment on the works of literature. So what to judge? Judgment of a literary, what does it mean then? Judge of a work of literature does mean that if you come across a poem, you have to judge on the basis of its merits. Merits म्हणजेच काय? Is it worth reading? What kind of literary qualities does it possess? And what are the demerits of the poem? So that is the judgment which is expected in literary criticism. And a critic is one who gives judgment on the literature. Fine. In the second century, the nature of criticism aimed at interpretation of texts. Interpretation of texts and commentary on the improvement of the works of writers in Greek and Latin. So somehow the nature of criticism gradually widens. Initially, it was restricted only to the word judgment. Fine. And later on, when it came to the second century AD, the nature of criticism started aiming not only at judgment, rather it deepened down and started aiming at the interpretation of text. And after interpreting the text, after interpreting any work of art under scrutiny, then a critic is supposed to give commentary on the work of art. Moreover, it is the duty of a critic to give some commentations or commentary for further improvement for the writers in Greek and Latin. See, in the 4th century BC, when it was originated, critic was only restricted to the judge of literature, judgment. When it came to 2nd century AD, the nature of criticism widened. Interpretation became an integral part of judgment. Judgment came later. First, it became interpretation. After interpreting the work of art thoroughly, a critic is supposed to give some commentary on the improvement of the work to the writers. Fine. Later on, criticism is the play of mind on a work of literature, and its function is to examine its excellencies and defects, and finally to evaluate its artistic worth. So here lies the true essence or true nature of criticism overall. We say criticism is a play of mind where the exercise is done on a work of literature. As I told you earlier, work of literature does mean any genres of literature. And what is the function of criticism then? Function of criticism is to examine the excellencies, the superiorities, the strengths, the plus points of a work of art, whereas as well as even to draw out the defects, some lagging behinds of a work of art, and on the basis of on the basis of this examination, a critic needs to evaluate its artistic worth. Final commentation does mean that we, being a critic, you need to give a proper judgment to the work of art on the basis of the excellencies and defects by taking into consideration all those things, and then you have to give a evaluation like the work of art is good or bad. If it is good, what are its excellencies? If it is bad, what are its defects? All these things are to be covered while criticizing any work of art. Moving further, see, the 4 words are I've given over there. Initially, it becomes interpretation. Without a thorough interpretation, a proper interpretation, a critic cannot go further. After interpretation, the second stage becomes examination. Examination, I told you earlier, examining the excellencies and defects of a work. Then, on the basis of these excellencies and defects, plus points and negative points, merits and demerits of the work of art, a critic moves further to evaluate a work of art, and after making thorough evaluation, final stage is to give judgment. Judgment does mean that, again, I would like to tell you, judgment on the basis of its evaluation on the basis of this examination depends on the true interpretation, a thorough interpretation of a work of art. This is the cycle where a literary critic needs to dwell upon. Then there has been conflicting views and theories and definitions in summarizing the true essence, nature, and function of criticism. If you look at the nature of the criticism, you will find that there are different words, terminologies that incorporate in this. Interpretation is there, examination is there, evaluation is there, and even judgment is also there. When we look at all these four things, it is subjective one. Subjective doesn't mean that whatever, if a poem is liked by me, not necessary that the same poem can be liked by someone other. My point of view, my interpretation of the poem may vary to the another person's interpretation. So depending on this subjective views, there have been various conflicting views and theories in order to focus on, in order to define the true essence, nature, and function of criticism. What are those views? What are the conflicting and different views that have been recorded in the mean course of time that we are going to study from the next slide? See, these are the definitions. By the definition, it becomes very clear that the word criticism and how the term definition had various interpretations. According to Atkins says, while defining this term criticism, he says that criticism is the play of mind on the aesthetic qualities of literature, having for its object an interpretation of literary values. This definition gives emphasis on aesthetic qualities, and the end of interpretation, the end of criticism is not judgment, rather judgment is based on the literary values. So the two concepts become very essential to take into consideration as far as Atkins' definition of criticism is concerned. He gives much more emphasis to aesthetic qualities and literary values. Second definition, it says like this: criticism is the exercise of judgment in the province of art and literature, exercise of judgment in the field of, in the world of art and literature. And the critic, a person who criticizes, is a critic. Who is he? He is a person who is possessed with, who is blessed with, who has the qualities, who has the knowledge, the necessary knowledge to enable him to pronounce doesn't mean to give right judgment upon the merit or worth of such works as come within this province. When we closely scrutinize this definition, आपण असं म्हणू शकतो की क्रिटिसिझम हे जजमेंट आहे, एक्सरसाइज ऑफ जजमेंट आहे लिटरेचर आणि आर्ट मधलं. आणि क्रिटिक इज अ पर्सन फक्त क्रिटिसाइज करणारा क्रिटिक नाही होत. वेअर वी कॅन से दॅट अ क्रिटिक कुणाला म्हणायचं, अ क्रिटिक इज अ पर्सन हु हॅज साउंड नॉलेज about the literature, and on the basis of his knowledge he is enabled himself to give right judgment upon the merit or worth of any work of art which come across to him. So here या ठिकाणी गोष्ट सर्वात महत्त्वाची आहे. क्रिटिसिझम करत असताना सर्वात महत्त्वाची व्यक्ती जर कुठली असेल तर तो एक क्रिटिक आहे. तो क्रिटिक cannot be a layman. Critic cannot be an ordinary person. Critic can never be an ordinary reader. He has to be equipped with the sound knowledge of literature, sound knowledge of criticism. Then and then only he should have the ability to give commentation on any work of art. Without that, criticism can never fulfill its achievement. Next point is though, they only mistake the nature of criticism to think its business is to principally find fault. Criticism, as it was first instituted by Aristotle, was meant to be a standard of judging well, the chiefest part of which is to observe those excellences which should delight a reasonable reader. Just we have discussed this thing earlier. The true criticism lies in the hands of a true critic. Usually असं म्हटलं जातं की नेचर ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम एक लेमॅन म्हणजे एक सर्वसाधारण असं कन्सेप्शन असतं की क्रिटिसिझम म्हणजे फक्त फॉल्ट फाइंड करणं, एखाद्यातल्या चुका काढणं. हे फारच क्रूड किंवा एक लो डेफिनेशन आहे क्रिटिसिझमची, छोटी डेफिनेशन आहे. नेचर ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम किंवा जेव्हा अरिस्टॉटलने याची पहिल्यांदा सुरुवात केली होती, when Aristotle tried to define, tried to launch this word criticism, he never meant only to find faults. ह्याचा अरिस्टॉटलचं विजन, अरिस्टॉटलचं conception of criticism ही फार ब्रॉड होती as far as the nature of criticism is concerned. अरिस्टॉटलच्या मते when he launched this word criticism, he had the thing that criticism meaning it's a standard of judging well. जज करायचं आहे आणि एका चांगल्या उदात्त पातळीवरती त्याची जजमेंट व्हायला पाहिजे. स्टँडर्ड ऑफ जजिंग वेल म्हणजेच ट्रू नेचर ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम आहे. इट वॉज इन्स्टिट्यूटेड बाय अरिस्टॉटल, अकॉर्डिंग टू अरिस्टॉटल. बट आय टोल्ड यू अर्लियर की क्रिटिसिझम मध्ये त्याचं नेचर अँड फंक्शन मध्ये वी कुड फाइंड आउट देयर आर व्हेरियस views and opinions and those are conflicting also. So true essence जर कुठला असेल क्रिटिसिझमचा तर that is judging well. त्या judging well च्या अवतीभोवती जनरली त्या गोष्टी घडत असतात. Then we have the cheapest part, which is to observe excellencies and which should delight a reasonable reader. Cheapest part कुठला आहे? फक्त fault find करणं नाही. वर्क ऑफ आर्ट मध्ये जे एक्सलेन्स आहेत, एखाद्या वर्क ऑफ आर्टला अशा कुठले पॉइंट्स आहेत किंवा कुठले फीचर्स आहेत की जे ते वर्क ऑफ आर्टला प्राप्त करतात, शोधण्याचं काम त्यांच्या आधारावरती त्या वर्क ऑफ आर्टला जज करायचं, इव्हॅल्युएट करायचं काम म्हणजेच काय नेचर अँड फंक्शन ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम आहे. त्याच्यानंतर पुढची डेफिनेशन अशी डेफिनेशन आहे, तो म्हणतो इज द वर्क good or bad, that is critics domain. एकदम simple, soft, understandable definition है, without going deep further. एकदम superficial level ला एकदम apt definition जर कुठली असेल, एखादा work of art आहे तर चांगलं की हे सांगणं म्हणजेच criticism आहे. आणि critics domain काय after interpreting the work of art, it's good or bad, हे सांगणं काम critics आहे. समजतंय? नेक्स्ट स्लाइड बघूयात आपण. एक स्पिनग्रॅमची डेफिनेशन आहे. हा काय म्हणतो, सोल टास्क ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम इज टू आन्सर 3 क्वेश्चन्स. What has the artist tried to express? How has he succeeded in expressing it? And was it worth expressing? या 3 गोष्टींचा सार म्हणजेच सोल टास्क ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम आहे. Next है, criticism is the art of estimating the quality and character of a work of art and its function or work of the critic. It is this definition is designed by I. Richards. He says that criticism is the art of estimating the quality. Estimating करना म्हणजे काय? Value करना. The quality and the character of a work of art. एखाद्या वर्क ऑफ आर्ट ची किंमत काय आहे, त्याची क्वालिटी काय आहे, त्याचे कॅरेक्टरिस्टिक्स काय आहेत, त्याचं इस्टिमेट करणं, त्याची इस्टिमेशन लावणं, हे काम आहे एका क्रिटिकचं. आणि क्रिटिसिझमचं ट्रू नेचर अँड फंक्शन ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम आहे. आणि इट्स फंक्शन ऑर वर्क ऑफ अ क्रिटिक आहे टू एस्टिमेट द क्वालिटी अँड द कॅरेक्टर ऑफ अ वर्क ऑफ आर्ट इज द नेचर अँड फंक्शन ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम. देन टू सेट अप ॲज अ क्रिटिक is to set up as a judge of values. I. Richards थोडंसं डीपन करतो, थोडंसं इंटरप्रिटेशनच्या सुद्धा पलीकडे जातो. हा तो काय म्हणतोय, टू सेट अप ॲज अ लिटररी क्रिटिक इज टू सेट अप ॲज अ जज ऑफ व्हॅल्यूज. जज ऑफ व्हॅल्यूज म्हणजे लिटरेचर शुड गिव्ह सर्टन ह्युमन व्हॅल्यूज, हे डिझॉल्व्ह व्हायला पाहिजेत थ्रू लिटरेचर, असं डेफिनेशन होती आय. रिचर्ड्सची. वेअर मॅथ्यू अर्नॉल्ड काय म्हणतो, विक्टोरियन क्रिटिक आहे फेमस. अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम, criticism is a disinterested individual to learn and propagate that the best that is known and thought in the world. एक disinterested individual म्हणजे काय, objectively without involving personally with any work of art, तटस्थ थांबून तटस्थ राहून एखाद्या वर्क ऑफ आर्टला, एखाद्या वर्क ऑफ आर्ट समजून त्या वर्क ऑफ आर्ट मध्ये जे काही बेस्ट आहे ते शोधणं आणि त्याचा प्रोपॅगेट करणं म्हणजेच काय, त्याची जाहिरात करणं, त्या वर्कची किंवा ते जे काही बेस्ट थॉट आहे, बेस्ट आयडियाज आहेत, ते आयडियाज प्रोपॅगेट करण्याचं काम कोणाचं आहे, क्रिटिसिझमचं आहे. असं मॅथ्यू अर्नॉल्डचं डेफिनेशन आहे. Once again, I would like to read this definition. Criticism is a disinterested endeavor. It's an exercise. Disinterested म्हणजेच काय, तटस्थ राहून, थर्ड पर्सन राहून टू लर्न करायचं आहे आणि प्रोपॅगेट करायचं. प्रोपॅगेट डज मीन दॅट टू ऍडव्हर्टाइज इट. ते पसरवण्याचं आहे ते काम. द बेस्ट काय पसरवायचं ते, द बेस्ट दॅट इज नोन अँड थॉट इन द वर्ल्ड. जगभरामध्ये जे काही बेस्ट आहे, इट मे बी आयडियाज, इट मे बी थॉट्स, हे शोधणं, लर्न करणं आणि द बेस्ट दॅट इज थॉट आणि आयडियाज आहेत ते प्रोपॅगेट करण्याचं काम क्रिटिसिझमचं आहे. सो ही मूव्स बियॉन्ड लिटरेचर वेअर ही टॉक्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड इटसेल्फ. टी.एस. एलियट म्हणतो, criticism is the commentation and exposition of works of art by means of written words. In short definition आहे, according to T.S. Eliot, what he says, criticism एक commentation आहे and exposition. First exposition येतं, then commentation येतं on a work of art by means of written words. You need to write it out, what the work of art says to you, what kind of message it delivers to you. You have to write it down, and the strengths and weaknesses again. You have to comment on the work of art in a written format. That is criticism. Criticism is the commentation. Commentary करणं, exposition करणं, expose करणं म्हणजेच काय? It's a critic's domain to find the different interpretation of a work of art which a common reader may not be able to find it out. हे exposition आहे आणि commentation on a work of art by means of written words. Writing that becomes very essential in T.S. Eliot's definition. T.S. Eliot काय म्हणतोय? The end of criticism is the elucidation of work of art and the correction of the text. पुढची definition, एवढ्या definitions आहेत. When we look at the function of criticism, by looking at the definitions, there are certain things which becomes very clear. There are certain various critics who went beyond criticism, who went beyond literature. According to some, it was like correction of text. According to some, it was just exposition. According to some critics, it was like finding out the true essence of values, value of judge of values. So by looking at all the definitions, it would confirm that there are various interpretations, various and conflicting opinions which are still rest in the field of criticism. पुढे बघूयात आपण the function of criticism. हे चार गोष्टी आहेत. There are four words. त्याच्यामध्ये नंबर 1 आहे judgment, जज करणं. Etymologically criticismचा मुळातच अर्थ होतो judgment. इवन अरिस्टॉटल सुद्धा म्हटला होता की criticism हे art of judging well आहे. Fine. Etymologically criticismचा अर्थ मुळात होतो judgment. पुढे काय म्हणतोय, the literary critic is therefore primarily an expert. Judgment, you can never ask anybody to judge you without the proper understanding of yourself. जज कोणाला करायचं याच्यावरती सुद्धा बऱ्यापैकी गोष्टी किंवा क्लॉजेस भरपूर आहेत त्याच्या पाठीमागे सुद्धा. सो द लिटररी क्रिटिक therefore primarily कोण असायला पाहिजे, an expert, a scholar who uses his special faculty म्हणजे knowledge and training to examine the merits and defects of a literary work and pronounce a verdict upon it. Literary critic कोण असायला पाहिजे? Primarily, basically, fundamentally, an expert असायला पाहिजे त्या फील्ड मधला आणि त्याची जी एक्सपर्टीज आहे त्या विषयाबद्दलची, त्यांनी जी ट्रेनिंग घेतलेली आहे त्या पर्टिक्युलर सब्जेक्ट मध्ये, त्या पर्टिक्युलर आर्ट मध्ये, त्याच्या आधारावरती he needs to examine the merits and defects of a literary work, and त्याच्या आधारावरती प्रोनाउन्स करायचा आहे वर्डिक्ट whether the work of art is good or bad. Good आहे. The primary function of a literary critic is to arrive at a pronounced and meaningful judgment of a value. The judgment of value आलेली आहे. फक्त वर्क ऑफ आर्ट ला जज करायचं नाही, क्रिटिसाइज करा म्हणजे काय म्हणतो आपण त्याला एक्झामाइन नाही करायचं. बियॉन्ड दॅट द प्रायमरी फंक्शन ऑफ अ क्रिटिक इज टू अराइव्ह at and pronounce a meaningful judgment of value. Then I. Richards म्हणतो to set up a critic is to set up as a judge of values. Again, goes beyond literature. It goes into the field of values, human values, or say literary values also. The literary criticism is judgment of books, reviewing, and finally defining of test and a tradition of what is classic. Somewhat it has to closely associated with the classics. ही रेने वेलची डेफिनेशन आहे. पुढची कन्सेप्ट आहे इव्हॅल्युएशन, जजमेंट, इव्हॅल्युएशन. इव्हॅल्युएट करणं the work of art ला. When a critic attempts to judge the value of a work or literature, he can be said to have evaluated the work of art. Evaluate आपण करतो on the basis of our interpretation. Estimate करतो त्या work of art ला whether to be a good or bad. Evaluative, judicial, normative criticism attempts to judge the merits of the literature in relation to literary, social, moral, and other value systems. As I told you earlier, मागच्या याच्यामध्ये सुद्धा बऱ्याच ठिकाणी value झालेल्या आहेत. Judging the value does mean that there are different type of values, literary values, social values, moral values, and whichever values that has to be reflected through the literature, and it should be penetrated down to the human essence also. T.G. Williams accordingly, the function of a literary critic is to evaluation of what has been written in terms of aesthetic principles appropriate to literature. हा थोडासा बाजूला जातो. Art for art's sake, aesthetic qualities बद्दल. He tries to forget values. He tries to forget what kind of impact does a literature gives on a reader. ह्याच्या सुद्धा पलीकडे जाऊन T.G. Williams only talks about the literary values and the aesthetic principle कुठपर्यंत लिटरेचर मध्ये अवेलेबल आहेत त्याच्या आधारावरती इव्हॅल्युएट करण्याचं काम हे एखाद्या लिटररी वर्कचं आहे असं तो म्हणतो. पुढे इंटरप्रिटेशन आहे. इफ जजमेंट टू बी रियल एंड ऑफ क्रिटिसिझमचं जजमेंट असेल, एंड ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम जजमेंट जर असेल तर इंटरप्रिटेशन मे बी एम्प्लॉइड एज द मीन्स, एक टूल आहे टू अचीव टू द प्रॉपर जजमेंट. एक चांगलं जजमेंट करण्यासाठी proper interpretation असायला पाहिजे. So interpretation also one of the chief functions of criticism. To feel the virtue of a poet, the painter is to set forth these qualities, 3 stages of the critic's duty. Walter Pater said, poetry is a criticism of life. Criticism is an interpretation of that interpretation. Criticism हे interpretationचं interpretation आहे म्हणतं. त्याच्यानंतर आहे वॉल्टर पॅटर म्हणतो क्रिटिसिझम इज द आर्ट ऑफ इंटरप्रिटिंग आर्ट. हे सिंपल आहे, इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ आर्ट. सो टू कन्क्लूड द ट्रू एसेन्स, नेचर अँड फंक्शन ऑफ क्रिटिसिझम, इट रिव्हॉल्व्स अराउंड ऑल दिस 4 terminologies: interpretation, examination, evaluation, and judgment. And each and every stages has most essential काय म्हणतो आपण incorporation while concluding to the judgment. So this is all what I had to discuss with you all today. So thank you very much. जर कोणाला काही प्रॉब्लेम्स असतील, काही अडचण असतील तर now you can ask me. Still I guess 3 or 5 minutes are remaining. You can on your mics. आदित्य, हॅलो. हा आदित्य, समजते?
हो हो.
क्रिटिसिझमचा अर्थ टू सम अप आपण असं म्हणू शकतो. जजिंग वेल आहे, जजमेंट आहे. जजमेंट whoever wishes to be in that side, he cannot be a common person. If I am a reader, I cannot give my judgment on any work of art without having proper understanding of that particular field. In case, समझते हैं?
Yes.
Okay, if you have any questions, you can ask. Sunny? इंटरप्रिटेशन, एक्झामिनेशन, इव्हॅल्युएशन आणि जजमेंट या 4 कन्सेप्टच्या आधारावरती ह्या गोष्टी फिरत असतात. जजमेंट, इव्हॅल्युएशन, एक्झामिनेशन आणि इंटरप्रिटेशन. याच्यामध्ये काय होतं? एकदम सिम्पलेस्ट डेफिनेशन आहे. वर्क गुड आहे की बॅड आहे ते सांगणं म्हणजेच एक क्रिटिक्सचं डोमेन आहे. फाईन. These are all the functions and natures of the criticism वगैरे होतं. जर कोणाला काय अडचण असेल, you can ask me right now. संचिता? आवाज येतो का व्यवस्थित?
कट होतोय आवाज.
हा, आता एक काम करणार आहे, हे जे रेकॉर्ड झाले ना, आम्ही ते ग्रुपवरती टाकून देणार आहे, सो दॅट यू कॅन इन युअर लेजर टाइम यू कॅन जस्ट गो थ्रू इट. हे दिसते का? स्लाइड दिसते ना?
हो.
ओके, गुड. ते वाचून घ्या. पीपीटी तुम्हाला ग्रुपवरती टाकलेली आहे. फाईन.
हा. हो.
हे अँड्रॉइड कोण आहे?
हॅलो.
हॅलो.
हा, प्रकाश जवळ.
हो सर. गुड मॉर्निंग.
हा, गुड आफ्टरनून.
बर बर. जा. Still one minute is remaining. If you have any queries, Asal, you can ask me right now. Fiza Sheikh? You can unmute now, no problem.
फिजा फक्त लॉग इन करते आणि काम करत राहते. She works in a medical store.
Okay, fine, good. No problem.
So I'm not sure whether she listens to everything or not.
Okay.
Okay, let that be.
Okay, fine.
Okay, I'm leaving the room now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aditya?
Yes, sir.
काय असेल तर विचार. संचिता? काय समजलं? बंद होत आता. काय डाउट्स असेल तर यू कॅन डायरेक्टली कॉन्टॅक्ट मी. यू कॅन आस्क मी, राईट? ओके.
ओके ओके.
ते वाचून घ्या. मी तुम्हाला गुगल ते हे आहे ना, गुगल क्लासरूम. गुगल क्लासरूमला तुम्ही जॉईन झालात ना?
हो हो.
हा, त्याच्यावरती तुम्हाला नोट्स वगैरे मी सेंड करत जाईल. आणि ह्याच्यावरती ना एक 10 मार्काच्या पण टेस्ट घेणार आहोत. कळतंय?
Okay.
There will be an objective test of 10 marks. Okay?